Thank you so much for inviting me to speak at inspirED, and thank you for the introduction. Just a little fun fact, I'm sitting right up here at the top of Australia in a place called Darwin, and I'm speaking from the land of the Larrakia people, and Charles Darwin University does acknowledge all the First Nations peoples across the lands on which we live and work, and we pay our respect to elders past and present. Today, I'm going to cover the necessity of us thinking about assessment in the light of our current trends we've been experiencing through COVID and now this semi-post-COVID area that we see ourselves in. We're talking about assessment primarily and how the goals have slowly been shifting across a number of years around assessment and the types of assessment we need to be looking at for our students. But why? Well, a major issue, of course, is academic integrity. That is the rise of cheating services, writing services, as opposed to trying to counter that with more authentic forms of assessment. Another driving factor, of course, is how many institutions have changed their modus operandi around teaching just for building the person, but to preparing students for the world of work. This has been going on for many years now, as I say, but with the advent of newer forms of technologies, we can now start to do this in much more dynamic ways. Now, of course, that's partly caused by the advents we've seen in technology and the new approaches we have to using technology, but it also then allows us to reinvestigate or reinvigorate some of the different types of assessment that we have used in the past, but because of the limitations we've had of technology, we haven't been able to put them in place. So now is the ideal opportunity to look at ways in which to do that. So we look at some things that have been old, but are now new again. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel, though in some cases it's necessary, but we can be more efficient now with some of the newer technologies that we now employ. So here's a little scenario. I'm a visual arts teacher. I did pretty well at college, and so well that the college thought, oh, he'd be a good sessional lecturer or sessional teacher. And so this is partly true of me as well. So typically I teach in the way I was taught, and most of my students seem to be doing okay, so that's all right. But I typically taught using a mastery model. So that's stand and deliver, just like I'm doing now in many senses. But that was my teaching approach in the studio. And I was then asked to do a bit more online teaching. And I think to myself, well, that's fine, but this is, can I do the mastery model teaching online? And then I had to consider these things called constructive alignment, because as education has moved on, these types of arrangements have become far more prominent in our thinking. But what is constructive alignment? Well, it's simply a matter of how we align our learning outcomes in the unit or course that we're studying to the assessment, to make sure that what we're assessing is actually contained in those learning outcomes. At some point, I wanted to apply for becoming a senior lecturer. And so I needed to start being explicit about why I was doing what I was doing in my teaching. That is, what was my pedagogical approach? Whatever that meant. I mean, I hadn't done a whole lot of educational study at the time. What does that mean? Particularly as we move to more blended forms of delivery. So obviously pedagogy is the interaction between students, teachers, learning environments, and of course the tasks that we ask our students to do. So if I'm saying I'm using a pedagogical approach, really for many decades now, we've been talking about this notion of constructivism, but nowadays, far more broader than that. It's a range of different approaches that we use to teaching, particularly in the online space. In fact, we've probably developed more of an eclectic approach to pedagogy. And it's kind of like me playing a round of golf. Where I live, I have a golf course almost across the back fence. And so I like taking my clubs out. I know the first hole on my golf course is at 260 meters long. And so I'll use my 2 wood. And hopefully if I hit it well, I'll then use my 6 iron to get onto the green and potentially get a birdie if I can putt out in one. I will get to use my putter though on all the holes on this course. So the next hole is only 180 meters long. So I'm going to use a different combination of clubs for that hole, but I will always get to use my putter. So just like a set of golf clubs and a round of golf, I'm going to be dealing with first year students, second year students, third year students, postgrad students, all of which are at different stages in their learning. But what I'm always going to get to do is use my putter. I'm always going to get to do assessment with them. I have my set of golf clubs here, my set of technology enhanced learning golf clubs. And over the left here, we have a whole range of strategies that we use for learning and teaching, pedagogy, teaching. We have andragogy, which is more about the teaching of adults and the way adults learn as opposed to children learn. Because we use the term pedagogy as a cover-all term nowadays. There is hudagogy, which is much more about self-determined learning and how learners are becoming more autonomous. And of course, I suppose paragogy, which is probably one of the more latter terms, is that we've been how we co-construct meaning in our learning environments. That is, using environments where students co-construct their learning, not just with each other, with the lecturer, and with a whole group of other people as well, might be out in industry. On the right-hand side, we have all these theories of learning, of course, and I mentioned constructivism before, but there's also what we do with socio-constructivism, where we become far more social in that online environment. Of course, there's situated learning, where we will incorporate things like work integrated learning, placements, things like that, and connectivism. That is where we're doing this in a far more connected environment with the internet and things. And of course, down the bottom here, we have those assessments. Now, assessment is far more than just assessment. It's about design of assessment of learning. Well, of course, it's a design of assessment for learning and actually as learning. So we are all learning, and as we construct our assessment to actually build that learning experience, this is really the key here. And that is incorporating active, collaborative, and authentic forms of assessment and the strategies to help us do that. We do, of course, have an ecology of technologies that we use in our learning environments nowadays. It's not just the LMS. We have, of course, at the centre here, we have our student curriculum management systems, we have our learning management systems. Importantly, over recent years, we've got our productivity and communication tools like Teams or Slack or Trello, things like that that allow us to be far more productive. These are tools that our industry are using, and the businesses they go into will be using these type of tools to work together with their colleagues. And so maybe we need to be thinking about how we're doing that more in terms of learning and teaching too, to be far more productive. Isn't that a funny thought? That students could be productive, not just empty vessels waiting to be filled. We've got content management systems where we keep our content, our readings, our things like that. We've got our lecture capture systems, of course, but not just lecture capture, not capturing a 2-hour lecture or whatever, but capturing shorter, sharper elements of teaching that can be nuanced and broken up with our content. We have our e-portfolio systems and our evidence rendering tools that allow our students to represent themselves to the outside world and their learning. And also, of course, our virtual conferencing systems, just like Zoom, Teams, Collaborate, all those different tools that allow us now to provide a much more hybridized or polysynchronous type of learning. Around the outside, of course, these tools within the system, that is, we have our data, of course, that we collect for learning analytics and the way in which we can see how students are going within that scenario, within our scenarios. And on the outside, we get some of the data from these tools, but not a great deal of data. We have our social media platforms, our Twitters, our LinkedIn's, our Facebooks and things like that, which of course used by many students, not necessarily as part of learning and teaching, but to be more social and to understand, to share information. We have our web apps and open education resources. We have our third-party streaming services like TED Talks and YouTubes and things like that. Professional identity tools like LinkedIn and other professional tools that allow them to have a more professional identity associated with other colleagues. And then, of course, academic integrity tools like Turnitin and writing tools. Now, these tools are getting very smart, and so smart, they're getting smarter than us in many cases. And so we need to be really conscious of this as we move forward. I'll return to that point in a sec. We, of course, do need to be accessible as well. And this is really important as we move forward, that our systems have got this notion of accessibility associated with them. Most of the tools nowadays are pretty accessible. So we're good there, but we need to make sure that we're using appropriate meta tags and things like that within what we do. I'm coming back now to this AI thing. So should universities be worried about the increased capabilities of artificial intelligence? Well, yes and no. That particular example, that article that I highlighted there, talked about this notion of a lecturer took his exam, all the exam questions, he put them into a bot, online bot, and the bot answered every one of those questions perfectly. That person who did that exam would have got 100 out of 100, but it was done by a bot. Okay, so do we have to be conscious of this? Yes, we have to be conscious of it. Do we want to panic about it? No, we don't want to panic, because I think we actually could be a little bit more intuitive and a little bit more smarter than an AI engine. Well, hopefully most of us anyway. So we do have writing assistance tools. So for example, if a student was to present you a piece of work that was 49% written by an AI engine and 51% written by themselves, would that be considered original work? Maybe, maybe not. We've got tools like Grammarly. We use a tool called Grammarly. FeedbackFruits has its own kind of writing assistance tool and things like that, which uses an AI. There are other cloud-based tools that help us to generate, extract, predict, mine. They can fill forms, they can do paraphrasing, they can do translation, transcriptions. So many things these AI tools can do now. So they have knowledge banks that help us with revision. We have knowledge banks. Lots of different universities have knowledge banks that help our students with the revision, identifying gaps and targeting the pre-production set of materials. So our AI engines have access to many of these as well. We tailor our exam questions. Can we do that so that it can't be answered by a machine? We need to be really interested in this space. Otherwise, it's just going to overrun us. We have to be interested in this space. We cannot. I beg you, please do not hide your head in the sand over this, because it's coming at us, and it's coming at us really quickly. AI is used in all walks of life. Of course, it is used in education. It's used in innovation. It's used in data science. It's used in the future of computing. It's used in a whole realm of our life. So, cheating versus authentic assessment, which is really the point of my talk here. This is on my Instagram feed. So I had this post down here, which appeared on my Instagram feed because somehow the data showed the people that I was involved in the university. And so I got this post from the Assignment Solutions Network asking if I wanted help writing my assignments. Of course I didn't, but at our university we have there are about 1,281 sites associated with academic fraud and cheating that are blocked by our university website. And that's only about 84% of those are what's given to us by our regulator, TEXA. But we have to find other ways of identifying these cheating sites as well. It's one thing to say that we need to change assessment to be more authentic, but we need to be able to back that up in a consistent way with working with our lecturers to help them understand what more authentic assessment is. In many cases, that does mean dollars, but that is absolutely where we're at the moment. 2 steps. Teachers need a better understanding of what it means, what this all means to their teaching, and we need to associate them, connect them with assessment mentors to help them understand the different forms of assessment that we can use moving forward. This is where we get back to what was done in the classroom back in the day that could be really useful here. We, at our sites at CDU here, in March this year, we had 7,533 attempts to get to cheating sites. That's just in 1 month. In August last year, October last year, we had almost 10,000 attempts to get to cheating sites. That's what we block through our university network, despite what they might be trying to do to get to these cheating sites from their homes. We can't capture that, of course. The reality is they're trying to cheat, or they are trying to find how to cheat. or trying to find help because they're in a desperate situation. What we have to do is be able to use this data to help them get the answers before they have to go to a cheating site. I did a review of an external review of a graduate certificate of higher education. This is teaching our discipline academics how to teach. So it's a grad cert, they do 4 units, and this is what they had to do in their assignments. They had to do over the 4 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 essays. Essays are one of the easiest things to buy online. They had to do reports, again, very easy to buy online. They had to do quizzes. Again, quizzes are very easily bought online or very easy to cheat online, finding the answers to their quizzes because most of them are open book. What they did do, fortunately, was they had a portfolio associated with it. They did some blog posts, some presentations involved there, a teaching plan and things like that. There could be, the feedback I gave them was less essays, please, less essays, less opportunities to cheat. Essays, of course, are important to construct, but if we're talking about teaching academics, discipline academics, how to teach, is teaching them how to write essays the best way. My wife is a psychologist. Through her 3 or 4 years of full-time study she would have written 50 to 60 essays. Since she's been a psychologist, she has never written an essay. Is that authentic assessment? What there is, though, is a whole range of other things that could be seen as authentic assessment out there. The use of human voice, the way we can use images, collaboration, peer review, of course, thinking of FeedbackFruits, posters and infographics, e-portfolio reflections, work integrated learning, so many things. There's a beautiful list there that I've given you, and it's also contained in this recent journal article I wrote, if you want to check that out. But I'm going to focus in on just a few of these for us in the few minutes that I have remaining. So, getting our students to create an online social media advertisement or something like that. So most students have access to social media platforms. They get ads thrown at them all the time. And so let's help them create an image or create a social media campaign that can be done and shared through their Microsoft Teams or Yammer or a closed Facebook site or their e-portfolio, and let's talk to them. Let's get them talking with each other about what they've done. It could be used in VoiceThread, another great tool. It could be used up in FeedbackFruits. Who cares where it's done? But the reality is we can do these things now in our technology-rich environments. What about a brainstorming activity using sticky notes and things? Like what we used to do in the classroom. We had these sticky notes that we used to write things on and brainstorm, stick them on the wall. Many people still do that, of course, but that's been a bit more difficult in the online space until things like OneNote and Padlet came along to help us do that, or Google, whatever it might be. But students do this in smaller groups or individually, if they're doing it synchronously or asynchronously. Let's try and use that same approach. Create a wall for your classroom, but do it in the online space and get them to then synthesize their ideas and pull that together. That can't be done through an AI engine, but to synthesize those ideas based on the wall of information in front of them. I bet that AI engine can't do that at the moment. This is also then presented the outcome of their brainstorming activity, and whether that's through an auditory activity or whatever, could also be used. So here's just a very brief example of what a Padlet looks like. And they could do a summary of what's on that, for example. Of course, we'd hope that there'd be far more things there. Asking our students to do a description of a process as though they're presenting that to a novice. So they could do that, of course, synchronously or asynchronously, just like I'm doing now, through Zoom or Teams or Collaborate, and they can present their ideas as though they are talking to a novice. If it's recorded, of course, they could even do that on their phones or put it up through the LMS functionality or the Teams or Stream and the media platforms that you might have at your disposal. VoiceThread, again, is another great tool to do this with. The video functionality in FeedbackFruits is great for that too, and the different scenarios you can paint. Trick here is to ask our students, getting our students to ask questions as though they are a novice. Okay, getting the other students to ask the questions. Oh, I don't understand. Can you explain a bit more about that? And getting them to interact, maybe a bit of role play. How about getting them to create a mind map or an infographic or a diagram of a concept? And there's so many options here that we could get them doing in terms of that thing that can't be generated by an AI engine to that extent, because it's about what's in your unit or course. And of course, that is accompanied by a description. Could be a PowerPoint, could be put in Word or a more sophisticated tool if you have it. It could be posted up again, or it could be going onto VoiceThread or onto Teams or whatever it could be. And then it could be, of course, put as a peer review activity as well. So many options there for us to do that. And just a very quick example of what, one on an infographic about blended learning models. So very simple. Okay, well, it is simple, but it takes some thought and some metacognitive processing on behalf of the students, which is exactly what we want them to do. We could then get them to write a letter to a friend, what they learned this week. Pen pals is what used to be the case. I used to write to my cousin every month. She wrote back. We talked about what had happened in the previous month. Similarly, we could do that with our students, reflecting through a journal or whatever it might be. It has to be it could be a 5 to 10 minute audio explanation of what happened, as though they were talking on the phone, explaining to their cousin or something like that. Initially, though, we've just got to get that idea scaffolded for them, because in this case, we're talking about personal learning and things like that, what they learned. It may not be such a good idea to share that with other members of the class. So keep it in a more sealed space for them. So don't make it a shared document that others could see. So it can be a little bit threatening for them. Write a poem or an acrostic or something like that that allows them to think differently about it. Now, be aware that there are AI engines that will write poems. You can put up 10 words, 15 words, and they'll write a perfect poem for you. So be careful of that one. But still, that's not widely known and not widely out there. So get them to write a poem, but also explain the poem. So it might be, they might have got an AI engine to do it, but get them to explain why they did it in such a way, or write a blog about it, why they did it a particular way. Okay, really, we are wanting you to work with your peers in this space. Two heads are better than one, always. Education designers are really the people who specialize in this space of assessment. And if you are an academic and you don't talk to many other academics about this, maybe talk to them about it. Your peers are a great source of information. Your students are a great source of information too, if you think about partnership pedagogies. But be open, please, just be open to new ideas, because that's how we're going to move forward. My final word on this is we are now realizing that what was conceived as being good online learning is now being challenged by some of the newer, more student forms and approaches of learning and teaching. Not the least of this being due to the technologies that have evolved to allow us to be way more collaborative. Collaborative, love that word, love collaboration. Let's hope you guys can collaborate with your colleagues and friends and to come up with some great new assessment. Thank you so much for listening to me for a few minutes. Thank you.